All right. So welcome everyone to the Town of Richmond's Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. We have 5 members of the Planning Commission and we have a few guests. So if you're online and you could put your contact information, who you are, in the chat, but please don't put anything else in the chat. We can't take comments in the chat because we can't really keep up with them along with the dialogue that we're having. So just put your name and that you were here, and that would be it. Thank you very much. All right, so we're recording the meeting. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do after our welcome here is to review the agenda and take public comment on non-agenda items. Are there any comments on the agenda? Okay, well, I do have a comment on the agenda, which is I would like to remove item number 4 from the agenda. This is the recommendation from the Planning Commission to the Select Board to appoint Dante Denault, Zoning Administrative Officer, and Keith Oborn, Assistant Zoning Administrative Officer. We haven't really been informed much about this, and I feel that it would take up time that we may need for our public hearing. So I would like to postpone that to a future meeting when we have a little more information. So anyone have any concerns with that? I think it'll help us out tonight as well. The date we will ascertain at some point when we figure out what we need to know and how we're going to make that vote. The Planning Commission is required to vote on this matter. Okay, so we're removing item 4.
Please sign in if you can, please.
Yeah. Yep, anybody who's here, we hope signs in. So we're now moving to item number 5, public hearing on our draft 2026 town plan. So what I will need first is a motion to open the public hearing. We have a motion available. We would like to have a planning commissioner to move to open this public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Okay, so Ian is moving to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Yep.
All right, so we've got 2 seconds.
Go with Chelsea.
Chelsea, I think, spoke a little bit first, so we'll call Chelsea our newest planning commission member, Chelsea Brooks. We'll call her the second on this motion. All right, any discussion? All in favor of opening the public hearing should say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Mark, are you voting?
Damn mute button. Yes. Aye.
Okay. All right, the ayes have it. The public hearing is open. Okay, so I'm going to start with the goal for this meeting. The Town Plan Steering Committee, which was the group that was appointed actually by the Select Board to work on and generate a town plan, has requested that the Planning Commission approve the draft plan and 2 sets of amendments to the plan. The amendments to be incorporated into this draft as it moves forward. And what we're approving is just that the plan will move forward to the next stage in the process. The ultimate approval of the plan, we are hoping to be the town voters on town meeting day, which is March the 3rd. It will be a town-wide vote on the warning. And the fact that we're aiming for that date is why we have this rather compressed timeline, and I can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So anyway, what we would like to do is at the end of this meeting to ask the Planning Commission to approve the 2 sets of amendments and the draft plan, along with the maps, to move it to the next public hearing, which will be held on January the 5th in front of the Select Board. So we understand that it's a compressed timeline and also that people tend to get involved right at the very end of the process. So we are allowing further comments starting tonight up until December the 5th. And at the steering committee's next meeting, we will take those comments, all of the new comments that have been received, analyze them and review them and decide if they can be made into amendments for the next public hearing, which would have another set of amendments to be added in. So we're trying to leave the comment period open as long as possible. What the steering committee does is it looks at those comments that come in, makes sure they're not already included, makes sure that they're in balance with other comments. Obviously, there are many voices in this plan, and we would like to have a balance in the points of view. So the steering committee will decide if they warrant being made into amendments. A lot of the ones that we have tonight are from the public comments that have come in the last couple of months. So we have this compressed timeline partly because we are trying to get the townwide vote done at town meeting rather than have a special, more costly meeting to vote on this item. We've been working on it for a year. We were slowed down by the fact that the Regional Planning Commission is also working on their plan, and they kept asking us for input from our town into their plan, which kind of delayed us actually asking them for input into our plan, so to speak. So they have looked at the plan a couple of times. The Regional Planning Commission, they are required to approve it. If it is to be an approved plan, they have to approve it. They have signaled that they would likely approve it if we added this short list of amendments. That is one of the 2 lists of amendments that we have tonight to look at, is the required amendments from the Planning Advisory Committee section of the Regional Planning Commission. So they were happy with it. They thought it was a good plan. And there were just these few little amendments that they required. And there were also some things they recommended, which we have in our other list of amendments. Okay, and then we're going to look at the maps, which we got recently. They made the maps, the Regional Planning Commission. Many of them are similar to the maps in our 2018 town plan. If you want to read more closely or at your leisure, the draft plan and the 2 sets of amendments are in the meeting materials for this meeting. So number 3 and number 4 in the meeting materials list are the amendments with the amended language in red. So you can read exactly what we are planning to insert into the draft. Okay, so at the end of this meeting around 8:45, we would like to have a motion to approve the plan and the already prepared amendments. New comments that we hear tonight, like I said, will go to the steering committee for the next round of hearing and amendments. Okay, so that's what we would like, the Planning Commission would like to get out of this meeting. What we would like to do now is to find out what people would like to talk about in terms of the draft. There are a couple of ways we can go about this. We can present the amendments first, which do change some of the things in the draft. If people are familiar with the plan, we don't have that many guests. So if people would like to just bring up what they would like to bring up about the plan, that's fine. Or we can go more depth into perhaps some of the actual action items that have been suggested and talk about ways to think about these action items, how much action they're suggesting, where they come from, whether they're short-term or long-term. So there are ways to think about it. I thought it might be interesting, or if people are somewhat familiar with the plan, to think about the action items, which is the way forward for the next 8 years, what we're suggesting. So would anyone either on the Zoom or in the room like to suggest one of those ways forward? Do you just want to present your comments that we would also like to have in writing, by the way? If you're making new comments, please submit them to Keith in writing so that we can take them to the steering committee. Marcy,
I do have some comments and
you would,
I would like to make some comments.
okay,
I did prepare something.
all right, very good. So you could say who you are and come up.
Who are you, Marcy?
Did you
You want to come up? Yeah, why don't you come up? That would be great.
Copy, and I can send it electronically, so you can send it around to other people.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, my name's Marcy Harding. I live up on the Stage Road in Richmond. And I started focusing on the town plan on November 4th, the day of your public meeting with the select board. I spent a good amount of time reading the plan, went to that meeting that night, and on the 5th sent in a number of comments. And I want to just say that I appreciate the fact that you read those comments, and a number of the amendments, I think, relate to the comments I made, and I really appreciate that a lot. I know that the future land use map was finalized, I think, the day before that public meeting, and I reviewed it the day after the public meeting, because it wasn't, if it was available, I hadn't
Right.
found it on the 4th.
I think it wasn't available.
Right,
No.
in fact, my notes from my review of the narrative
Right.
said in bold letters, probably more than once, where's the future land use map?
Yeah.
So then I found it, and I've since reviewed it. So Act 181 was signed into law in 2024, just by way of background. And what I have done here is included a couple op-ed pieces that have appeared recently in VT Digger. And one was a piece written by Katie Gallagher, who on October 24th, 2025, and I think she works for VNRC, the Vermont Natural Resources Council. And I'll just read, maybe not all of this, but this is quoting from this article. One of the most powerful tools Act 181 puts in our hands is regional future land use maps. In the past, these maps were largely advisory, used by Vermont's regional planning commissions to illustrate where different areas might be designated for future growth or conservation. Now, for the first time, they carry real regulatory weight by being tied to Act 250 jurisdiction and providing towns a path to seek exemptions from Act 250 review for downtowns and village centers. And I'll go on to say this is again from the op-ed, Act 181 also enhances protection of Vermont's most critical natural resources and working lands by requiring Act 250 review for projects outside of growth areas with especially long roads and driveways. The new law will discourage scattered development that fragments farmland and forests. Development projects that fall under Act 250 review will now assess their environmental impact on forest fragmentation and wildlife, encouraging better site design. and a current stakeholder process will identify which of the state's most sensitive natural resources will require environmental review. And I've given you the link to where you can find that op-ed. And then not long after I read that piece, I saw on November 14th this year, another op-ed from 4 representatives, 1 independent, 1 Republican, and 2 Democrats from all over the state. And they said, Vermont is undergoing the most significant land use regulation update in over 50 years. As Tier 2 and Tier 3 mapping and rulemaking under Act 181 of 2024 move forward, decisions are being made right now that will affect how Vermonters access their homes and live on, build on, and use their land. These decisions will shape our communities and our landscape for generations. Yet many Vermonters who will be directly affected do not know what this will mean for their property. The only parcels not facing increased Act 250 jurisdiction compliance and financial pressure are those that are able to meet the Tier 1 requirements. This means most Vermont homeowners, landowners, and working land stewards will be touched by this process for designating automatic Act 250 jurisdiction. And they go on to talk about the fact that they represent a lot of people in rural communities and people that own farmland, forest land, whatever, business owners, farmers. And then they talk about legislation that they are introducing to do 4 simple things. They're asking that landowners mapped in Tier 2 and 3 must receive mailed notice before Tier 3 rules are finalized. Vermonters should not find out after the fact that new regulations apply to their home or land. They want meaningful participation. People deserve a real opportunity to understand and comment before decisions affecting their property rights are finalized. Public trust depends on this. They want continued progress on housing. They don't want anything to interfere with the housing exemptions that have been put in place under Act 181. And then the 4th item is that they want fair property valuation. If new rules limit or change how land can reasonably be used, that reality must be considered in tax assessments, not automatic tax cuts, just ensuring valuation is based on real development potential in light of these changes, beginning with the 2027 grand list. And then it continues, and I won't read the rest. This is me talking now, not an op-ed. There's information we don't yet have, which will inform decisions on future land use in Richmond. The Land Use Board is expected to issue a statewide map in the spring, as the chair here mentioned earlier. And I could be wrong, correct me if I am. I think the CCRPC, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, has not updated its future land use map. Is that right? They're in the process.
Well,
They haven't done it.
Call it a draft, so the
They've got a
second,
draft too.
call it the second draft.
I did look on the internet and could not find it.
Yeah, it has to be approved by the
Yeah.
Land Use Review Board.
Okay.
Blurb.
So there are 2 pretty critical maps, I think, that we don't have, that are sort of, I still don't know if this whole process is bottom up or top down, but whatever it is, we are meshing into 2 other plans and they aren't available yet.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that Richmond wants to lead the charge on such far-reaching changes. I've been told we are working in a compressed time frame for updating our town plan, as the chair has mentioned today. And from the proposed schedule to get to a March 2026 vote, I believe that's true. The current town plan was approved on November 6, 2018 and expires on November 5th, 2026. Can we slow down, take the time we need to review the draft town plan and future land use map? Can we have opportunities for meaningful public input? Can we vote on it on election day next November? That's one question. According to the agenda, the Planning Commission is being asked to consider approving the draft plan and map tonight. The plan was first introduced to the public at a meeting on November 4th. The map was finalized the day before, but not unveiled to the public at that meeting. Amendments are now proposed to incorporate changes from preliminary public comment and CCRPC review. More public comment is expected tonight, though I question how many people in town have taken the time to become informed. And I note that the map is not easy to find on the website. It's kind of heart buried a little bit. Did the Planning Commission participate in the development of the future land use map? If not, who did? Can someone explain the methodology used to designate areas on the map? Is such methodology applied fairly to all parcels in town? Do the designations equate to the tiers in Act 181? I don't know that. Why are some properties enrolled in current use not considered rural farm and ag? I believe this proposed amendment that speaks to the issues inherent in the draft future land use map. I believe this proposed amendment speaks to, okay, whatever. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, and now the proposed amendment I'm talking about, and the chair wrote this, I believe, in response to a comment I made earlier. And
Probably the
it
steering
says-
committee.
It says steering committee. It is possible that our Richmond FLU map may undergo some changes, likely minor, over the 8-year lifespan of this plan. There are several reasons why this might happen. Firstly, the new statewide FLU map upon which our map and our regional planning commission's map are based will not be finalized until it's reviewed by the newly created State Land Use Review Board in the spring of 2026. The Regional Planning Commission will then amend their map if necessary. We may then wish to make changes to our map. Secondly, the compressed timeline for adoption of this state and countywide plan has not really allowed adequate time for each parcel in Richmond to be individually reviewed for accuracy. I'm quoting from the amendment, it says Richmond, and my aside question is who or what entity, because it says Richmond will undertake this review as time allows and as individual landowners have had a chance to examine their parcels. As these changes at the granular level are reported and reviewed, the Richmond Planning Commission will amend our map after a public hearing. And I might just add as an aside that when I looked at the map, I did notice actually 3 things that I questioned about our own parcel. One of which I think the chair addressed with the Regional Planning Commission, one of which I maybe didn't ask very directly, and I still have the question. And the third of which I have a request of our town assessor regarding parcel boundaries, which is a different issue. I'm almost done. In summary, this draft town plan has new Act 250 implications due to Act 181, and the planning landscape has become more complicated. The time frame for adopting this town plan is compressed, perhaps unnecessarily. The future land use map was unveiled before it was thoroughly reviewed for accuracy and before other maps, which will inform it, have been finalized. And finally, very few people in Richmond understand the magnitude of the proposed changes. That's what I have.
So I could address your few actual questions.
Yeah,
About the voting later.
yes.
So if we fail to make this timeline, there are 2 options. One is we can have a special election somewhere during the year. And the second one is we can vote in November. However, if the plan falls out of approval,
Right.
this is a problem. This is why we were aiming for the March timeframe,
Yeah.
so that we have time. People tend to come out and talk about it right at the end. So we are happy that some people like you are coming and talking about it now rather than in November of 2026,
Mhm.
when it's much more problematic.
Right. Right.
The fact that this map, this new future land use map, is parcel based, is probably a good thing for us because people will look at their parcels.
Mhm.
They will not everybody will not look at his or their parcel even by November.
Mhm.
It's a long process. It's all new. It's new for regional planning. It's new for us to have parcels addressed. The working conservation group that worked on the flu map, represented by Conservation Commission, by Andrews Community Forest, people
Mhm.
who have been on the Richmond Land Trust or work currently, they spent several months trying to look at every parcel. It was impossible.
Mhm.
They looked at a tiny fragment to make sure the boundaries were correct. Even to understand the methodology that the Regional Planning Commission used to characterize, to use the designations, is opaque. So, and it's new for them. You know, we understand they were given this problem by the legislature. That supermajority made some interesting choices that have made it, they have come into the municipal level in ways that we have never seen before via the Regional Planning Commission. So we already have had several discussions with them, and we got them to change some of the things on their map. They are now, even though it's a draft #2 map, pretty unwilling to change it because they know that the land use board is going to look at it. Now, how the land use board is going to know how to change it is pretty, that's a big job for the whole state. So what we're hoping is, and we can amend this map anytime, yearly, if we want. Regional Planning Commission says they're committed to amending it in 28.
Mhm.
Even though it's an 8-year map, they're going to look at it in 28 because they know this is going on all over.
Mhm.
So what we're hoping is that now that we have an actual parcel-based map, people will look at their parcels and that they will come and talk to us about their parcels. Are the boundaries right? I mean, the Regional Planning Commission didn't, their methodology that included putting current use forestry and ag lots into the rural conservation designation. We questioned that. Why are these not in rural ag and forestry?
Right.
And they did not put actual conserved parcels that we knew were conserved because the Richmond Land Trust holds the conservation easements. They did not put some of those in, let alone utilizing all of the ANR maps, the Agency of Natural Resources maps, that are enshrined in statute also. They sort of did and sort of didn't. This is why some parcels you will see are partly in one designation and partly in another, because there's an overlay of the ANR maps and nobody really seems how to use those maps legally in this kind of context. So, and our map, because of the timing of it, is required to align both with the 2018 regional planning map and with the 2026 regional map, which has been challenging. And, supposedly that would be helped if we passed it later on after the new regional plan, which is going to be in the summer, probably July timeframe.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, but we don't really know.
Is there any
So-
opportunity to do something as an interim map with, with a sunset that, as of some date after regional and the statewide land use panel finish their thing, that we come back and get our map, right?
Well, we can just amend it. We can amend the map.
If we do it. Once the map is adopted, I think there's a lot of impetus to leave it be.
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to work with. So, but there's no sunsetting mechanism, I don't think. You can't have a map that sunsets. You just have to amend it. So I think you
Okay.
had a question? Oh, okay. So, and the second one, yeah, so that's amending map and the methodology is,
I was just gonna say also about the sunset sort of aspect of this is we don't want to set ourselves this date by which we have to do something. Because when we do something, should we amend it, it's going to be informed by these regional maps, but also public input from our town. And so if we say, oh, we're gonna change this by the end of 2028, but we don't have any public input because people just don't necessarily look at the map, we have no idea what to expect.
Well, if you give them an opportunity for public input, I mean, it would be like amending the town, you'd be amending the town plan.
yeah, well,
And
would have
so-
public hearings for sure.
Just sorry for you to
Go ahead,
cut you
yeah.
off. I just also want to make it clear to whoever is here, as well as just for the public and recording, that the future land use map did have opportunity for public input in sort of different forums. At the regional level, there was two different public input sort of periods that were posted about on our front porch forum. We were trying to rally up interest, and so if we assume that the same amount of interest is going to come, essentially the challenge is, how do you get folks to comment? How do you get them interested? We've sort of been engaging the public on the process throughout the summer from porch forum posts, and have not had a ton. And so the hope is that, like, if we have something concrete here in our town, right, that people can look at like you did and look at your parcel, that will sort of, it's like a little fish out in front, like as some bait, right? Like come engage, come and talk to us. Because if there isn't any public engagement, then there's not really anything to amend, right?
Right. I'm more concerned about good government and whether or not the methodology used in developing these maps was applied uniformly across the town. That's really my concern, is fairness, justice. And I gather from what you've said is that some parcels were looked at with a magnifying glass and others were kind of a broad brush in certain areas.
Well, some of that was because of the input that our conservation working group provided
Right.
to the Regional Planning Commission, is that this is wrong. And they changed it accordingly.
Yeah.
These parcels are actually conserved. You
Right.
must put them as conserved. So we did have input in that way,
Yeah.
but it was impossible to look at every single parcel everywhere. And we do feel that this approach is actually going to be much more useful to us. Our map, our future land use map in the 2018 plan is what we called the fuzzy map. That was a bail, kind of, because we didn't want people to look at their individual parcels. By design, we wanted it just to be like, well, the upper right-hand corner, if you look at the map of Richmond, is kind of like there's a lot of forest land. We'll make that kind of fuzzy greenish. And the Regional Planning Commission was not that thrilled with that map, but they did approve it. But the map now has to align with, like I said, 2018 and 2026. That map would not be approved by the Regional Planning Commission. We think that it's an opportunity to actually look at the parcels and to actually understand where the highest priority natural resources are located. I mean, exactly. So we feel it's really kind of an opportunity for us to move forward a little bit. And actually, if we're going to talk about natural resources, know where they are. Where are they actually? So the steering committee ended up, I think, thinking, and the conservation working group ended up thinking that this is a positive step forward for us. We're not just kind of talking like, well, some green out there, but So
Do we know how these districts, these categories that we-
designations.
designations relate to tier 1, tier 2? I know tier 1 is the village. That one, we don't need to talk about tier 1.
Town center,
2 and
village
tier-
areas,
And
that's
tier
what.
3.
Tier 3 is the highest priority natural
Right.
resources. And everything else is tier 2 in between.
Including ag and forestry.
Yep, everything that's not highest priority natural resources
Yeah.
will be tier 2.
So,
So, according, just thinking about the Digger article, having the state tell everybody in the whole state of Vermont who's in tier 2, which is most people, and tier 3 is a huge task. I
Mhm.
mean, if people, I don't know that the land use review board is going to be able to do that, to tell them individually, you're in tier 1. I mean, people have to pay attention. That's all.
mhm.
That's all I can say. And, some people pay more attention than others,
Mhm.
but so the conclusion from the legislature that they have passed down is that our natural resources that we've always taken for granted will not remain unless we pay attention to them.
Yeah. I
This
agree.
is a way we can pay attention to them. And the trade-off is the housing, of which 85% they want to be in the already housed areas, in the residential areas that already have development, to spare the natural resources from the encroachment. We need more housing, but we don't need it at the expense of the natural resources that make Vermont what it is. So that was their philosophy, and that's what they've tried to do, and it's difficult. And the Land Use Review Board, I mean, if you read what they had to do since their formation, it seems ridiculous.
Mhm.
Like they have to formulate all these policies, they have to look at all these maps from the whole state. All the regional planning commissions have to submit their information, and they have to, anyway, tough job.
He's
So-
here.
Uh-oh.
So thank you anyway for your comments. And as you said, we did incorporate some of them into our amendments for tonight.
What happened?
I think the projector went to sleep. I don't
Yeah.
So how about in the room? Any other comments? Suzanne, you have any comments?
No, just learning.
Yes, great. Well, we're counting on your date of the January 22nd.
Can you propose,
Be done.
go over the whole plan? Don't mind.
Sure. And you are
Joe
Joe.
Templin,
Okay,
yeah,
great. You've signed in, hopefully.
yeah.
Yeah, so the plan, and you can pick up a handout up there,
Yeah.
which is the introduction, which kind of lays things out.
Yeah,
There's the introduction, which talks about the vision and how the plan is laid out. And then the next 11 sections by topic are the required elements that we have to have by state law in the plan. Community development, economic development, education, they're listed on the contents.
why is education part of this? Because it's really not. Education should be a local and a state. Should be one by local and the state.
The education section is required by state statute to be in the town plan. You have to have an element that is addressing education. So-
They dictate the sections that we need to follow through on.
Yep. So we try to talk not only about the education that's the school system, but also like preschool education, adult education, the senior center education, those kinds of things. It's as a lifelong process. This year, this plan, 2026, is actually, it's very important to talk about the actual school system, because another huge piece of legislation that was passed is Act 73, which is totally reorganizing the structure,
Districts in it, yeah.
the districts, the class size, I mean, it is a major change. So we would want everybody to be aware of that so that, you know, the people who look at the plan and think about it, to stay involved with that, you know? What is happening with Act 73? We have several action items in our goals to try to encourage people to really stay looking at what is happening with the school system. And the school and town relationship is quite complicated. You know, the schools own the buildings, the land, some of it is owned by the town. It's, you know, so anyway, that's why we have an education section. So then we have those 11, that is the meat, so to speak, of the plan,
Sure.
or the vegetables if you're vegetarian. We have the 11 sections. They have a narrative portion which talks about the current situation and our challenges right now. So it's a historical document. Where were we in 2026? And then we have goals and action items. And the action items are then gathered all together into the implementation table. And then we have an appendix, which is additional information that is sort of too much for most people who even attempt to look at the plan to deal with, like charts, data. There's a whole energy section that outlines the goals of our transition to electricity off fossil fuels because of the climate crisis. So there's a number of things in the appendix that are additional. There's a history of Richmond in there if you want to talk about that. There's stuff about the geology and geography. So that is the plan. And yeah, so we feel that we captured a balance of, you know, because people feel many ways about these different topics. Natural resources. There are people who really like the natural resources, people who really want the recreation. So we're trying to make a balance in this plan to cover all the public input that we received. We did a survey. We had a lot of responses to that. There's a summary of the survey in the appendix to the plan. So, yeah, so that's what we've got for the plan. And it, you know, guides what we do, picks out problems that may or may not be solved. Much of it is aspirational. You know, there are problems, there are suggestions that we have in there that are going to require funding. Well, we're going to have to, that goes to the board, maybe to the voters. So though that goal may or may not be achievable, but it's something that people have thought would be a good idea that we could aspire to. So we have had criticism that it's not practical enough. There are some things that are practical, but there are some things that are quite aspirational and some things that are assigned to, let's say, the town. You know, shop locally if you possibly can. Well, there's no way we can make people do that, but it would help our local economy, for instance. So it's a combination. That's one thing about the action items is that they serve a lot of different purposes. Some are aspirational, some are actually practical, some are short-term, some are ongoing. Many of the action items are carried over from 2018. There were goals that we had in 2018 that are ongoing. Prevent building in the floodplain, for instance, which we do. So it's good. We're doing it already, but we need to be vigilant because there's always pressure to develop in the floodplain because we have very little places to develop. So they're varied, the action items. So, all right. Any other comments? How about on the Zoom? Anybody would like to make Alexis?
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Alexis Latham. I apologize for being one of the people looking at this late and coming with comments. And I appreciate the opportunity. So I do plan to send you some written comments, but just to speak briefly about my suggestions is just to put more language to prioritize food and farming in the plan. And you know, from looking at this plan, you would never really get the idea that we really are an agricultural community. And I don't see it in the 11 sections in the beginning. You see community development, education, all these other things, but I would expect to see food and farming in there. I know there's obviously a lot of overlap, and there's some great action items related to food and farming embedded in different like fragments in different places in the plan. But I think that if we had a narrative section that kind of put it all together in the beginning to really sort of outline what the real challenges are and the importance. I mean, because to meet so many of the goals in this plan, we really have to really strengthen farm viability and to, you know, we're losing farms and continues to happen. And you know, it may appear that things are going well. I'm somebody who has a small farm with my husband, and we tried to do the farmers market. And I was one of many, you know, at the time, I say all kinds of people like me trying to make it work. And so there's all kinds of barriers. And there, you know, there's actually only 2 farmer vendors who were at the farmers market this past season. So why is that? Why aren't there more? Why aren't there more people in this town who are getting into farming and who are able to actually really make a go of it? So, you know, there are these action items in the plan that say do research into farm viability and how we could increase farm productivity, and that's great. But that's a, you know, that, and then the biggest challenge, I think, is the equity of it, that all this great local healthy food that we're producing in this town, and that there's some people who are low income have no access to it. And I think that's a challenge that really needs to be highlighted in this plan, that's something as a community we should really try to take that on. And I don't know what the answers are, but I would like to see, you know, one idea is to, you know, get a grassroots task force going that would look at all these challenges and try to come up with ideas. And you know, because who's going to actually do it? You know, this action item buried in there that says research into regulatory barriers to farming, and that's a piece of it. I know that was part of the reason why we dropped out, and other people at the farmers market, especially people who are trying to do value added and sell prepared foods, for instance, at the farmers market. So that's it's not going to get done if it's just like buried in there, and we don't have a sense of why it's a priority and why it's important. And somebody really needs to take that on, do that research and that investigation. So if we were to form a grassroots sort of a task force, and I would volunteer to be a part of it, of people who could look at, you know, take these action items and look at them and really try to do something. So I don't know if it's still possible to add a whole narrative, you know, couple of passages, maybe even a page, you know, action, so there would be 12 sections and not just 11. That would be, I mean, I've seen other town plans where food and farming is a major section in the town plan. I had one other comment I wanted to make just briefly about transportation, and that is where it says that the research shows that public transportation isn't viable in Richmond because we don't have the population density. There is a model. It is the Tri-Town Shuttle, which has been working for decades, which goes throughout all these towns that are smaller with smaller populations than Richmond has, and it's been working. And that system, it keeps expanding into other towns, and it would be great if it would expand all the way to Richmond. So I would like to just put that in one sentence as a model for bus system that actually could work for us, would be the Addison County Tri-Town Shuttle. So thank you for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, we'll talk about these ideas at our steering committee meeting. And I would think just off the top of my head, at the very least, we could have an action item to form a task force. We might not be able to put all the individual elements in the plan itself, but if we start with a task force, since it would be something kind of new for us. Anyway, we will talk about it and talk about it with you as well.
Okay.
So for the next round. All right, any other comments?
Connie?
Connie?
Hi there. You can hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for listening to comments that come out of people's imaginations and their experiences in terms of what this town could be. I realized, and I've been aware that the town plan has been in the making for a while, and realized only recently that there's a piece of work that has been done by the Richmond Racial Equity Committee that might have deserved placement in the town plan. And what that is, the topic here has to do with policing and policing goals and objectives for the town. I did read through the town plan and see that there's an acknowledgement of the town's policy of fair and impartial policing that relates to the Richmond Police Department, which is excellent to see. I was part of a community group that helped work on that and move that into place, and it has changed over time, but it has been great to have that represented both in our community and in the town plan. That's wonderful. There's another piece of work that was also done with the select board's approval, which happened in May of 2022, when Richmond Racial Equity brought forth a proposal that there be 4 objectives that the police department try to attain. And the reason I'm bringing this forward is that as I read through the town plan and its breadth and embracing so many important issues, I felt like, well, maybe this belongs in the town plan too. And I would ask the town plan steering committee to consider it. I did send Virginia an email. Maybe it was yesterday or maybe it was earlier today. I'm so sorry. It's been a rush. Everything seems to be going by quite quickly. That listed those objectives. And those objectives are simply supporting there's 4. And I'm just going to say them out loud quickly so you can put them in your thoughts. They're also in this email to Virginia. And my question is can you consider them? So the 4 objectives are supporting the development of a Richmond Police Department mission statement that reflects community values and expectations. 2 is supporting the publication of data such as police reports and other data points on key policing activities and outcomes. The police department has been moving in this direction already, and there's potentially more work to do. But the objective is that there be data about the police department posted on the town website that's easy and clear to read for any Richmond resident or anyone else who visits the police department. 3rd is being transparent about the training of police department members, such as de-escalation of events, restorative justice, lethality assessment, anti-bias, that we are able to see what is taking place in terms of police training. And 4th and last is promoting and conducting regular forums at facilitated meetings, such as community forums or select board meetings, to strengthen the connection between the police department and the community. So the goal of all of these is for the Richmond Police Department to be present as an integral part of our community and developing sort of a mutual supportive relationship with the department and community members. So that's my request. And it is in writing, and I am glad to work with anybody on this, but it's to include these objectives in the town plan for the police department. Thanks for listening.
Connie, what is the name of that document that was approved by the select board in May of 2022? Does it have a name? policy
It
of
does.
something?
It does have a name, and let me, I will track it down because it doesn't spring right to my mind, and I'll put it in the chat if that's helpful to you, Virginia.
Well, or send it by email. 'Cause-
I will send it by email. Thank you,
Yeah, that would
Virginia.
be
We
good.
appreciate that.
Or, and to Keith, that would be great, to have the name of that. It must be a policy of some kind.
It was
So-
a proposal, and then the select board accepted it. So, and I can give you the date on which that happened.
Okay, yeah, and a little explanation of what it is exactly. So.
Yes, I will. All right. I can do
Great.
that. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Joe. Yep. Okay, any other comments?
Well, excuse me, but I'm groping here trying to find the raise my hand button.
Okay, well, that's okay. You can just shout
I'll
out.
just raise my voice,
Raise your voice, right?
No, first, congratulations to you guys. I was involved in just that one FLU part of it, and I can imagine what it was like, having to wrestle that whole bunch of sections that you have, and I congratulate you on your ability to put forth a pretty coherent document in a short time frame with all the conflicts. What I've been trying to grope with over the last couple of weeks is exactly how to get a few suggestions into the process, and I think you clarified that tonight, Virginia, with saying just send them on to Keith. So
Yep.
as I understand it, they would go to Keith, then they would go to the committee for review beginning on what, December 10th, I think it is.
Yep, our meeting will be on December 10th. So if you could get them in by the 5th.
By
I'm
the
trying
5th.
to pass these comments along. Keith and I are trying to pass them along to the committee as we get them in so that the committee can be thinking about them and thinking whether they can be adapted to the current scheme or, how we're going to deal with them. So as soon as
Okay.
you can, that would be great by the 5th.
I think that would be great. Just some of my, broader comments, again, I think you did an amazing job, so please take what what I'll say in context, and they just deserve, talking about it, and I think we can work together and, come out with something that's really great. I mean, I see some factual things about, who owns what, those should be easy fix via amendment. I do think that, recreation deserves a section of its own, maybe, because it seems to elbow its way into places where it's kind of, I don't know, secondary, maybe. If we're talking about our natural resources, or, I mean, I would argue just say natural areas and take that anthropomorphic spin off the word resources, that extractive idea. But anyway, it's only one of the ways we use our resources, and it seems to get quite a bit of play under natural resources, which I think it deserves somewhere, but maybe not there. We're talking about what's there, not necessarily how we use it, but where we're looking for guidelines to do that. It actually, there's more said in natural resources about recreation than there is in the community development area, where I think it would stand. I mean, that's the way we develop. Recreation is a form of development, right? I mean, it's something that people do to the landscape. It's development. And even though, a 10-foot trail is not like Taft Corners, it's still changing the use of the land fairly radically sometimes because of the impact that can have. And so you want to be, careful where you place it. The I think there's an undue amount of editorializing about the Andrews Forest Committee. Full disclosure, I'm a member of that committee now. We're making great progress. There's kind of a preachy, admonishing tone to that we might, lighten up a bit. That doesn't really reflect what's going on there now. And it talks about climate change, which is great because that is really a key impact that we have to worry about, a key threat. But it's only one threat, and even within there, there's a focus on flooding and the harm that climate change will bring to our human infrastructure, which is valid, totally, but it's really going to change the natural landscape beyond flooding. I mean, there's drought, the opposite of flooding. There's drought that we're going to have to contend with. We had a pretty serious one there. What's going to be the impact of that on our plants and wildlife? Climate change will bring new species into our area from the south as current species, sugar maple, and others depart. Pathogens are coming in. We've lost critical food sources for the wildlife that are as much a part of our rural character as anything is our scenic views, you know. But beech trees are gone, butternuts are gone. Beech trees are going quickly. Butternut are gone, and there are threats coming into the hemlock where deer shelter in the winter, oak that are critical for everything from chipmunks up to black bears and everything in between that depends on those guys. So I think anyway, I think there's relatively simple ways that we can incorporate that and really beef up natural resources to be better. I haven't had much of a chance to focus on everything else because one of the beauties of the plan and previous plans as well is that there's a nice integration among the sections where you could be in community development, talk about a natural resource, or you could be, I don't know, utilities and facilities and talk about parks, whatever. And I think I haven't really looked to make sure all that was through. We submitted some info. We on the Andrew Suarez Committee submitted some suggestions on where changes to what was said about the town forest in the previous plan, how they could be updated. And I haven't had a chance to go through and see if we've done that. And I think that can be fixed with minor amendments. So that's it. I'll send my thoughts in. Thank you very much for making time for this discussion. And I know we have a tight time frame, and we'll try to work through it and come out with something that's really terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I mean, one of the many discussions that the steering committee had, which by the way was a great public effort. The steering committee was fabulous.
Yeah.
Was whether to leave all that integration in there. So it's interesting that you're talking about it because there were points of view that were minimalist, like, okay, if you're going to talk about natural resources, it should only be in natural resources, that kind of thing. But we do understand that a lot of these things do overlap. And for instance, you know, if you're talking about, let's say, transportation, well, it's in community development, it's in emergency resilience, you know, climate change obviously goes throughout the plan. So with the structure that we have kind of inherited of having these separate elements, these separate sections based on what the statute requires, maybe something in future plans that we want to think about. Is that the best way to go, to have these separate sections? Or, you know, I mean, there's always such a lot of information for everybody to digest anyway, that to think that you're going to just have one totally integrated structure is a little hard, I think, to contemplate. At least this way you can see that recreation is in all these different areas, you know, so whichever way you come at it from, at least you get a mention of it. So that was an interesting discussion that has run through the steering committee's work.
Yeah, it's running through the Andrews Committee at the same time. You know, what we talk about in the ecological section, well, what's that mean in the education section, the agriculture, recreation, of course, you know, yeah. And do we get redundant between the sections, you know, or count on people to read the whole thing through, right? And then understand these different little chapters or try to blend them some way. Yeah, there's a real art to that. Anyway, thanks.
And we've kind of allowed for the redundancy, you know, So that
Yeah.
you might have something that appears in several different sections, because we know that people will only review maybe one section, because the whole thing is kind of hard to read the whole thing unless you're working on it for a year, and then you will have read it.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
anybody else out there would like to make a comment? Okay, well, if there are no further comments, I think maybe I'll just try to briefly go through the amendments that we're proposing for tonight. I'm sure that the planning commission will have read it along with the draft, but let's see. So I'll start with the ones that are required by the Regional Planning Commission. They tell us in order to get their approval for the plan. The first comment, so we're looking at the list, and the first comment was that they didn't really talk about whether we were compatible with the neighboring towns' land use. We did mention that in the beginning, that the plan will be compatible with the neighboring towns. They thought there should be more description about it. So basically, our big agriculture residential district, which is now segueing into a district that has farming, forestry, conservation, and rural residences, is pretty much the same on our neighboring towns, the borders with our neighboring towns, being Jericho, Bolton, Huntington, Heinsberg, and Williston. They are mostly showing agricultural land, forested land, rural residential areas. So there's nothing like a nuclear power plant or something that we're proposing right next to somebody else's town. So we put a little more detail in there. And we were also required to explain how not only are we aligning with the 2026 plan, but with the 2018 plan if we pass it in March. So we put in a paragraph about that they recommended that we put in. So that was the first couple of changes under number 1 and 2. Number 3, they required that we put in all of the housing targets that they gave us. So
that currently exist.
These may be changed by the Land Use Review Board. So these targets may change, like the blue map may change. But we put in the most recent set of housing targets. And I'm asserting in here that these targets are aspirational. There's no penalties for not meeting these targets. There are many reasons that a town might not meet the targets. Their methodology of assigning the targets, they were given by the state a regional target to meet. And then they divided it up among their municipalities that were within their range. So, and their methodology was another methodology that's a little obscure, but it included the terrain, the topography of the area, the size of the area, the size of the town. You know, they put in what they thought were the important factors. So that's their methodology, you know, that's what we have to accept. These numbers are aspirational. And one thing that I asked about, if you look at, that I thought was just interesting, we have time, we can talk about it. For the time period between 2025 and 2030, that's the first target for 2030. The low, medium, and high targets are almost identical. 96 units are set up for the low end target. In the 2025 to 2050, we only have twice as many units. And I asked them, why is that? Why do we have 96 houses that have to be created in the next 5 years and only 207 in the next 25 years? So he said, well, a lot of people want housing now, but by 2050, the boomers, they're probably not going to need any housing. So since he was talking to one, he was not very like diplomatic.
Yeah, he's 32 years old.
Right. Darren Shibler, he's a nice guy, but
Totally.
yeah, anyway. So just in case you were wondering, I puzzled over that.
Yeah.
How come we have to make them all now in the next 5 years and then we don't have to make that many? If you annualize that, it's, 19 a year now, but by the time we get to 2050, you only have to make 8 a year. That's because the boomers won't need it anymore. So
Nice.
that must have gone into their algorithm. Anyway, so we put that in because they required that we make a statement about
As
it.
required.
Yep. And then we just had a couple of small edits, state legislation and its impact. The town centers and the village neighborhoods where you can be exempted from Act 250 review. It is not only 50 or fewer dwelling units, but it's also on 10 acres or less in the water and sewer areas. So those are the places. If you have water and sewer, if you have 10 acres or less, if you have 50 units or fewer, you may be exempt from Act 250 review. So where that is, if you all will at some point look on the future land use map, it's the purple area with the lighter mauve around it. It's quite a small area. There are not a lot of natural resources there, but that's the area where the Act 250 exemption will occur. And then the only other last one was in the energy section. They forgot to send us table A6, which was about natural gas usage. So they have now sent it to us and we will put it in there with all the other tables about our fossil fuel usage that we're trying to work on. So those were the only things that they found about our plan that they needed to be changed. So we have written amendments for those. The second set of amendments came mostly from public comments, including some of Marcy's and including some of the regional planning commissions that they didn't require, but they recommended. So we took some of those as public comments. So there's a number that are just like typos or formatting. We did have we had several people actually who wanted the words recreation director put in somewhere. So we put it in to where we had already talked about having an outreach staff position, such as a recreation director. Many people have thought this would be a great addition for the town. It's just a money thing. Can we support another staff person? So it's an aspirational goal is to have someone looking at the recreation and, managing it. We may or may not get there.
Staffing meetings, eventually.
Staffing meetings, yep. As recreation increases, which it seems to have done, and the conflicts increase with the natural resources, perhaps a recreation director may eventually, people might feel more of a need for that. In future land use, Marcy already quoted the part about we might expect some changes as the land use review board gets going, cranks up. We can change our plan at any time. So we put that statement in there to make sure that people understood that. In the housing section, there were a few things that were actually wrong, that were incorrect. The housing section was written primarily by the Housing Committee. The Housing Committee that was formed from a 2018 goal in the 2018 plan. That was a goal that was actually accomplished. The Housing Committee has been working. Connie Van Egan is on it, who just appeared. So there were a couple of things that were a little incorrect. So we corrected those in the housing section. Natural resources, was, as Brad was saying, that is a place where recreation, because recreation is primarily out of doors, the kind of recreation that we have here. It appeared mostly in the natural resources section, some in the community development section. We may revisit that perhaps, but it was a tough choice as to where to put that stuff about recreation. And we put it in natural resources because that's where the conflicts seem to have been lately. And we altered the last line to say special focus should be given to the relationship between trails and natural areas to ensure that our irreplaceable natural resources continue to exist and serve both people and wildlife. So we had a lot of input on both sides of that question, and we were trying to be neutral and have a balance, but express that we need to protect the natural resources. So we altered that sentence to bring a little more kind of balance, I guess. Then the earth resource extraction was recommended to be beefed up a little bit by the Regional Planning Commission. We had a statement that was adequate because it said exactly what was required. But by the statute, you have to have a policy of extraction of earth resources. We do have a policy. It's in our zoning regulations. So we added some of the details from the zoning policy into the plan to satisfy them to think that we do indeed have a policy about the extraction of earth resources, like, that you have to be responsible for putting the land back and that kind of thing. More details are actually found in our zoning ordinance. One of the controversies that we had was about trails and what they are. The Andrews Community Forest folks have been struggling with that question for years, and the Planning Commission has had on its short list to define what a trail is. In our zoning, a recreation path is allowed in any district. Recreation path is not defined either. So on our short list for the Planning Commission, we still need to define trails so that we're all talking about the same thing, and recreation paths, and then develop regulations for the creation and management of trails and trail networks. This actually was also a goal in the 2018 plan, was to have a town-wide community discussion about trail networks. It was not done.
So it's not ongoing?
It will be ongoing, but we hope it'll be at least short term,
There you go.
kind of midterm. I don't know. I mean, all of these things depend on some kind of volunteer group doing something mostly. So you're going to get what people are interested in. That's what they're going to do. But the Planning Commission really is going to take that on this time, because we must do that now so that we have a common understanding of these terms. In transportation, we added trails on hillsides need to be carefully constructed to avoid contributing to fluvial erosion and increased sediment and phosphorus burden in streams. The town will work with the Richmond Trails Committee and Richmond Mountain Trails to make sure that trails are constructed and maintained according to regulations and best practices. So that's just to, one of the big items we had to address throughout this plan was about the flooding, because that's on everybody's mind, flooding, and our new kind of flooding, which is fluvial erosion. So we would like to make sure that not only development, but also the construction of trails is not contributing to those problems. Transportation does talk a good bit more about our transportation system being impacted by the flooding and how that we need to be careful. So we added some more language in the transportation section, roadway resilience, to talk about the hillside clearing question. Okay, in the appendix, which is our big baggy section with a lot of extra information, the CCRPC suggested that we put something about our racial mix. So we got some more statistics about our racial mix, and we put that in there in the demographics. We also changed about the population growth. The population has grown slowly. There was a period when it grew rapidly, when there was more land
To say it was when
to develop.
developments, the few that we have when they went in.
Yeah. So anyway, the population has grown somewhat in the last, so we changed it to say, well, it's grown slowly. And then a couple of other things just to clarify what we were talking about in the housing appendix. The strategic housing plan makes a lot of its own. It has its own aspirations, but the housing committee worked very hard on that document to try to actually put out some ideas about how we could help with housing. Along, many of them came from a study that was done that they had grant funded. So we made a few changes there. There's some graphics. They came from housingdata.com. And then we added a few things to the outdoor recreation areas. There's probably still more out there that we could add at some point if we want to gather these comments together and put them in at some point. Some other biking and hiking areas. So those are the public comments that we received since we talked about this at the last Planning Commission meeting, which was in October. So, are there any questions about anything?
It's a wrap.
Ian, your house has gone cold already. Ian's gone to his hat, so
Joe, it spit some rhymes.
he's gonna have to move around a little bit in a minute to keep warm.
I've been in circulation.
Any other comments about the way we're doing things, the fact that we're continuing to take information and trying to put it into the plan as best we can? Or anything else? Or are you all ready to vote? The Planning Commission is ready to vote.
I'd like to say that I think you guys did a good job incorporating Marcy's comments from the last steering committee meeting into this.
Yeah, well, we talked about them and, you know, they fit it in. This plan is very broad in its scope. And I think there are ways to adapt most comments that people make into the current structure. You know, like Alexis comments about food and farming. Well, we do have things in there, and I think there's a way without altering the sense of the plan at all to adapt some of those comments, and we will.
Yeah,
be
they're not diverging extremely from the general feel
No,
of what's
they're
been
just
written.
carrying it a little bit further, you know, and
Yeah.
adding some, maybe forming a task force is the way to go to really look at those things, or even the racial equity, the racial policing. Those comments, they're just really expanding upon something that we've already mentioned in the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've mentioned before too that these aren't things that people really disagree on. We just need somebody to champion the idea.
Yeah.
And that's usually the obstacle.
Yep. And that's the things that will get done are the things that get championed by people. Since we, with our small staff, run a lot on volunteers. So anyway, if anyone has any more comments they would like to make, they should submit them to us by December 5th, and the steering committee will look at them. All right, so I will take a motion for the Planning Commission from a member of the planning commission to approve the current draft and the 2 sets of amendments that have been presented at this meeting. If anyone wants to do that.
I'll make a motion to approve the current draft along with the amendments that were presented tonight.
Okay, so Ian has made a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mark, one of our non-steering committee planning commissioners. That's great. Did you have any other comments, Mark, that you wanted to make about anything? You liked the plan at the last hearing, so.
Yeah, I still do. Some of the comments, the amendments were fine, really. I mean, whatever, if it makes people happy. Including the CCRPC.
Right.
Let's get it done. It didn't change the essence of anything really. So
Yeah.
we're all good and moving forward.
We felt that was the case, that it didn't change the essence of what we were saying, and
Good word.
the CCRPC is required to like it, so there you are. Okay. So we have a motion made by Ian, seconded by Mark. Any comments, further comments?
Could can the public ask something at this point? Quick
Sure.
question. Will the draft, when or if, will the draft go to other of the committees, formally, or should they just be tuned in like we all are tonight?
Well, we don't have a formal strategy for notifying all the committees, but we could, presumably.
All the committees throughout the town? Or you're talking about the committees associated with the town plan?
What
Thinking of the town. I was thinking of the whole town,
the whole
transportation,
town? I mean, we could put,
conservation, recreation trails, the whole gamut.
right. We could put a note in the Front Porch Forum that there's a new draft. I don't know if that would help. I don't know. We could possibly email the chairs of the committees. Put out an email to the chairs of the committees to say that there's a new draft and that the comments will be taken on it until December 5th. We could do that.
That'd
Would
be
that
good.
help?
Oh, yeah, I think I think so.
Yeah,
Can't
why don't
hurt,
we do that? And we'll do a Front Porch Forum too, saying that there's a new draft and that we're taking comments for the next round of,
Through December 5th.
yeah, through December 5th.
Right.
And we'll contemplate them because that's when we have to put the agenda up for our
Yeah.
town plan steering meeting.
And we need to digest those comments before the December 10th meeting. That's.
Well, the steering committee has to read them so they can
So-
decide how to adapt them as amendments or
Yep.
place them into the plan or point to where they're already in the plan or, so yeah, we'll do that, Brad.
I think that would help. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve to go to the next phase, the draft that you see in front of you and the 2 sets of amendments. All in favor should signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. And,
Rebecca's dropped.
oh.
It's only 4.
Rebecca has dropped. Okay, so it's, all right, so that motion passes. And we will incorporate these amendments, and we will also begin the work of cleaning it up, cleaning the document up, which is removing the typos. There's some duplications. There's some other
Good.
format issues. That's part of the scrubbing process. Those do not have to be discussed as amendments. They are housekeeping tasks. We're trying to do this work ourselves rather than hiring it out to somebody to do. We're trying to do this work ourselves. So we will have many eyes looking at it. All right, so I think that's all we have on our agenda for today. Next step in the approval process we went over, which is the first of the select board hearings on the 5th of January. And then there will be a hearing on the 21st. The 5th will have the new amendments that have been worked up on the 10th of December. And they will go into the final draft that the select board will look at on the 21st, a special hearing. So,
Virginia, Bob Lowe calling. Did you
Hi, Bob.
vote in favor of the motion?
pardon me?
Did you vote in favor of the motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you have four, because you have to have
We
four.
have 4.
Yeah,
The motion
Good.
passes.
good, thanks.
Yes. Yeah, thanks. Yep. And Bob, you have some comments that have come in for consideration on at the 10th meeting. We have yours, we have Brad's, we have
Great.
some other that we're working with.
I think we're looking at 9. right now.
Alexis.
Yep, 9 sets of comments, and they have all gone out to the steering committee members who are looking at them and contemplating how we're going to work with them. So it's great. You know, we like comments, and
Especially written ones.
written is good. Yep.
Did Connie send you her list?
Yep.
Right.
But just like today.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I've sent it out around to the rest of the steering committee.
Yeah, and what I do, I have a file that has captured all the public comments that have been sent via email to me through either directly or through Virginia. I'll package those all up for the steering committee and put them into a zip file and send that out.
Right.
Let me write that down now that I say that.
Okay. All right, so if no one else has anything they'd like to bring up, we could entertain a motion from a commissioner to adjourn this meeting. To close the public hearing. I guess we should close the public hearing first.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, Ian and Mark, tag team. All in favor of closing the public hearing should say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Ian, you're in favor of
Aye.
it? You made a
Yeah.
motion.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, so the public hearing is closed, and now we can have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Mark is moving to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Chelsea.
Beat me to it.
And by the way, we have a vacancy on the planning commission. If anyone wants to join the planning commission to help further this work, that would be great. Does anyone object to adjourning? Hearing no objections, we will stand adjourned. We'll
Fantastic.
see you at our next meeting.
Have a great evening, folks.
Yep.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you all.